Terminator. Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite films of his. I think it's a very impressive film. Just the fact that this was like technically his first film, his first narrative film. The fact that, kind of push the boundaries of like stop motion animation when it came to like the Terminator, and then like kind of like the practical effects with like the Terminator like exoskeleton, and then all like the hybrid effects with Arnold Schwarzenegger's like half his face gets blown off and you kind of see the Terminator bits underneath the surface, like the makeup side, and then kind of like the animatronic side, the scene where, he's kind of like cutting into his arm and then like cutting into his eye, and you can see the cybernetics underneath, where they kind of switch back and forth, where you don't really know, like, is this like actually Arnold doing all this stuff, or is this the animatronic doing all this? So I thought that was really impressive. And one of my favorite things about the movie is just kind of like the action, suspense, and horror. Like James Cameron was very inspired by like the Halloween movies. Like he really wanted to do kind of like a 1970s style slasher movie, but with this one with a cyborg instead, because like he had that dream, back when he was making Piranha 2, of an exoskeleton crawling out of the fire, being pulled by knives and everything, and that kind of image very much haunted him, and he wanted to make a movie out of that. So I thought that was like a really, really cool kind of inspiration, kind of like literally came from his nightmares, and the fact that, since it is a Terminator, like obviously they don't make anything like that yet, as Sarah says in the movie, so he decided to make it from the future, coming to the past to terminate her, since she's the mother of John Connor, who's like supposed to be the savior of humanity after the machines rise up and take over the world and everything. So I thought that was like a very really cool aspect of it. The fact that it's kind of like, like the characters are on the run the whole time. Sarah and Kyle Reese are on the run from the Terminator. Kind of has like that monster movie feel, so you really feel like it really much is like a Halloween movie with the slasher after the final girl at the end. And the fact that Sarah Connor, starts off as this kind of like normal teenager. She's kind of like Jamie Lee Curtis's character in Halloween, and then she kind of like, as the story goes on, she becomes more sure of herself. She becomes more of this leader that Kyle is telling her about, that John will eventually be, and that she eventually has to raise him up to become. And then we see that more in Terminator 2. Yeah, the fact that she kind of has this whole character arc where she kind of goes from being ordinary to extraordinary, I thought that was really, really cool. And the fact that Kyle Reese is this very good supporting character, and then obviously he becomes the father of John Connor, after they kind of conceive him in the later scene in the movie, which I thought was a really cool twist, which you really don't really see that coming. The fact that John Connor sends technically his father back in time to meet with Sarah, and then eventually conceive him so that he can be born and then become the leader of humanity and the resistance. I think it's really interesting, the fact that all the exposition is told from Kyle. The fact that you don't know anything about this whole backstory with the res machines and everything, and like Kyle's giving all this exposition like while they're on the run from the Terminator, filling in all the gaps on all the backstory for Sarah to understand like what she needs to prepare John Connor for in the future. So I thought that was an interesting aspect as well. And also the fact that this is like a very like low budget film. Just thinking like Avatar, how that's like the most expensive movie of all time, like all these visual effects, and then you kind of go back to James Cameron's first movie with the Terminator, and it's like very, very low budget, very much like guerrilla filmmaking. But I know he started off at like the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking. That's where he met Galen Hurd, and he did a lot of visual effects for all these kind of like low budget sci-fi movies, and obviously he was at the top of his game. And then when he kind of had the opportunity to actually make something on his own, you can tell he went like all in, and he really pushed himself to make something great. And the fact that it is as impressive as it is, and the fact that it's now in like the National Film Registry for like film preservation, for being like historically and culturally significant. Just a testament to how much effort James Cameron put into this kind of very low budget, B movie, slasher story that, I'm sure like the studio didn't really have a lot of faith in, but James Cameron, being the visionary that he is, put all this effort into it. So I think, yeah, it's very impressive in that aspect. And then, the fact that it, spawned a whole bunch of sequels and franchises and video games and comic books and TV shows. It's just a testament to just how much of a visionary he is, and the fact that he's able to push himself beyond the boundaries of what's expected of him, and then he obviously kind of continues on into his other future films. But yeah, I just thought that was very, very impressive. And another thing is just like the storytelling and the world building, the fact that it's like a time travel story, and the fact that it's not the typical slasher story. You can tell like James Cameron put like a lot of thought into the backstory, into the time travel, into like the tech noir side of it. It's another thing that I kind of admire about him, is that he puts so much detail into all of his movies. The fact that he created the whole backstory of the Terminator, how it's an endoskeleton, that has like human tissue over it, and the fact that they created like this device that sends it back in time to terminate the mother of its enemy. This whole backstory of Skynet and the war and the resistance. You didn't really even have to put that all into the exposition of the movie. You could have just had it be, Terminator drops into 1984, and then he's going on a killing spree trying to find Sarah Connor and terminate her. But the fact that he has those flashbacks to the future war with like Kyle Reese, kind of in that underground resistance, and taking out all those Terminators that come in, and the dogs that are able to spot Terminators and all that. I thought it was very, very interesting. The fact that he kind of grew up loving science fiction and like reading science fiction novels, and watching sci-fi movies, Star Wars by George Lucas, and 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick were one of his big inspirations, and the fact that he wanted to kind of have everything kind of be grounded in reality somewhat, and have everything have an explanation to it. Just again, another testament to how detail oriented he is. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was just like the iconic line, I'll be back. The fact that when James Cameron wrote that line, like he didn't even think it was going to be get a laugh or be iconic or everything. He was just like, oh, just a thing that the Terminator would say when he comes in trying to get Sarah Connor, and then obviously gets stopped by the guy at the front desk, so he's like, says I'll be back, goes back and then drives the car through the police station and destroys everything. But yeah, just the fact that Arnold Schwarzenegger he's not going to be an Oscar winning actor, but the fact that his best acting is when he's playing a cyborg, and I think a lot of people kind of agree with that. He's not going to be a Shakespearean actor or anything, but when he's playing like a robot where he just feels like iconic, in a way. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up too.